thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it. Uh, your art's awesome. You're a huge inspiration, and I read a little bit of your backstory, and it sounds pretty amazing. It sounds like basically the true artistic journey. So, you want to tell me a little bit about what brought you here?
Oh boy, like go way back. Got to dial the clock back, Dan. Let's see. Well, first I was bored, but I jokingly state that I'd been drawing. I can't even remember when I started drawing. My parents have. I have some drawings from my first grade class. So I was 6, 7 years old, and I was drawing incessantly then.
Okay.
So I figure if you probably go all the way back, I left cave paintings in my mother's womb for my brother, my younger brother, to see 2 years later when he was born. So it's like I've been drawing ever since I think since I could lift a pencil, lift a crayon.
And
And
were you always into the sci-fi kind of fantasy stuff that you mainly do nowadays?
uh kind of. I mean, not obviously when I was really young. I shouldn't say obviously, but I wasn't really exposed to science fiction per se until the movies really started hitting, like Star Wars.
Okay.
And I still remember, like, that was a big break open kind of movie, which threw me into the world of science fiction. And
Okay. What, the early Star Wars?
what's that?
The
The
early Star Wars, was that what
Yeah,
it kind of
yeah, the
broke the
movie, yeah,
boundary?
1977. Yeah, I first saw it in the drive-in theater, so I had that crappy little speaker that they hang on the window, and that's all the sound comes. No Dolby surround, no. It's just
Well, it wasn't through the car audio,
that's
the
right.
speakers. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was but part of, I think, the reason why I just kind of glommed onto Star Wars so much was, before that, my parents used to get me a lot of model kits, World War II model kits, contemporary models, so jet fighters, tanks, battleships. And that's kind of how I consumed my time, was making these things, models with like 1,000 pieces to them.
Do you still have any of those?
Yeah, luckily I do have just a couple. Unfortunately, they didn't survive my late teenage years where everything explodes with firecrackers and,
Right, right.
yeah, and fire. So,
Yeah, I
so I
used to
guess
have GI Joes. They put firecrackers in them and have them like blow up, and
well,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It was just like, everything got blown up when the middle teen years when I discovered fireworks. So unfortunately, but luckily a few did survive. I did keep a few. So those are still back here in the studio. Uh, but I think that's what I wanted to say, is that the whole epicness of Star Wars, the vehicle, the fascination with vehicles and things. It was like, again, even Lucas used World War II footage for the dogfights.
Right.
And
Well, I know you use a lot of like myths and everything and try to incorporate a bunch of stuff. It's the first time I saw a sci-fi that wasn't like just one story about something weird. Like it
yeah,
actually seemed to have a whole universe and like a lot of stuff interacting. I love that. Was it kind of like that for you? Like with
yeah,
all the
there's that implied history, right? That
yeah, yeah.
things were beat up, things were aged, and that aesthetic was really, again, it just, you're right, it felt like a plausible world that humans could live in, right?
Right,
So yeah, so certainly I was at that time was also starting to watch the Star Trek reruns on
right.
TV, the originals from the 60s. So a lot, there's obviously a lot of factors that come into play, but yeah, like I quickly glommed on to science fiction and fantasy films and comics, all, and just ran, like that consumed my early adulthood completely.
Did you have like a favorite series of comic books or series of books, a series of movies aside from
Oh,
Star Wars?
oh, geez. Well, for comics, certainly. one of the first regular monthlies that I picked up was Conan the Barbarian. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, John Buscema was the brilliant penciler at the time, and I just loved his Conan.
No, I remember stuff. Well, Barry Windsor Smith, who did Conan later on and went
Yeah,
on to do a bunch of other stuff, he's amazing. I love his stuff.
yeah,
That heavily
yeah,
inspired me. So, did your
yeah.
parents encourage your artistic ambitions?
What it certainly, well, I don't know if encouraged. You mean like encouraged me to draw and things, or I think it certainly inspired me to tell stories, but I didn't really. Comics were like it's anyone who does comics, it's a whole nother skill set.
Right.
Right. I mean, being able to draw anatomy, figures, all kinds of basically everything out of your head. After obviously doing research, but as a young artist, I couldn't do that, but I could emulate a little bit of it. So some of my first early works in my not college, but high school level years was copying and emulating comic
When would
illustration.
that be? Around what era? Like what
Oh,
years?
I guess it was like early '80s. So like 1980 to '85 was my heavy comic book consumption era. I collected everything. Iron Man, Swamp Thing, Superman, Batman, Daredevil, Legion of Superheroes, Thor with Walt Simonson, George Perez doing the Teen Titans.
Yeah, he was. I interviewed him a
Savage.
little while ago. Walter Simonson. He was a huge influence. Like it seemed like that was one of the first times where comics really they weren't just like little drawings. They seemed to jump off the page. They seemed to really tell a story. I know he read a bunch into that. Like he read a bunch of the myths and so on, and tried to incorporate all that into it. So it wasn't just like some guy with the cape running around. It was actually an evolved landscape.
Well, I think that there was certainly the '80s saw that, right? Saw a change in storytelling for the superhero characters.
Right. Well, I wanted to be a comic artist. And I remember Alan Moore with like Watchmen and like those Swamp
Right.
Things and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That really broke boundaries for me. I was like, wow, this actually seems like an avenue that I could express myself in.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah. Alan Moore, Swamp Thing was like a psychedelic trip. Like talk about, and it was a mainstream DC comic too, right? And so it was
Well,
like,
here's the funny
whoa.
thing: it's like it
Yeah.
was about to be canceled. It was just when,
Oh, really?
like before Alan Moore came on board, it was like one issue away from being canceled, and they just kind of lucked out. They're like, "Well, we have this guy Alan Moore. He seems to be a big deal in the UK, and they got this amazing art team. They went to school at they went to school in Jersey at a pretty famous school, it's a Kubert School of Design." And he just lucked out, and he had like the best team. It was the best story, and they kind of let him get away with everything because it was about to be canceled. They're like, "What do we have to
Oh,
lose?"
wow. So that's why it was so. Yeah, I remember Steve Bissette was one of the illustrators, and is it Veach? Was
Rick
one of the
Veitch,
other.
yeah. I interviewed Steve Bissette too, and it was pretty much like he said when he looked at the comic page, he just wanted to destroy it. So when he looked at it, like that's why everything looks like it's bursting
It
off.
was.
They don't have traditional panels or
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
like
Everything
that.
was
Yeah.
fractured, right? That's what I mean by it was like a psychedelic trip, and that's what I loved it. It was like, wow, this is really fascinating because I also love the panels narration, that like Frank Miller was doing with
Oh
Daredevil.
yeah, he was amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think he was an awesome writer too.
yeah.
Especially when he got to like the Dark Knight and stuff like that, he really broke out.
Oh, right.
That was
Yeah,
another thing where he lucked out. Like just the writer quit or was about to quit, and they're like, "Well, why don't you try it?" He was like, "Job done."
yeah. Yeah. So comics are a huge influence on what who I am as an artist to this day. I still, think, in terms of like laying out panels, camera eye, I just kind of like go to the idea of comics as a solution
Yeah,
for
your stuff has real
design.
dynamism, real sense of motion, like
Yeah.
like odd angles and everything that
Right.
like makes it seem more alive.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people when they see your work, they're like, it looked kind of like the old masters, but it's doing like fantasy and sci-fi stuff, which a lot of people loved. Obviously, a lot of people love because you seem to be a very in-demand illustrator.
Well, it's part of. I think that I'm a like a mimic. I like to like absorb people's style, like approaches. Not so much styles, but just an aesthetic approach. So like I love like sucking in the comic book illustrators and taking traditional realism from classical, like rendering and storytelling, and and blend that together, and then spit it out with science fiction and fantasy as the kind of the veneer of the content. So it's
Didn't you where were you? You went to art school and you were born somewhere else and you moved to New York City. Is that correct?
yeah, I was born up in Vermont and went to college first at the kind of the local school, the University of Vermont, and but then eventually found my way, found a place at Syracuse University for the art training, and it was there that I was exposed to a lot of great professional illustrators and artists, visiting artists that were coming up from New York City, and also getting really great training. And I actually was trained not as like a storyteller illustrator, but as a fine artist painter. And
Right.
yeah, so I took a lot of that aesthetic, deconstruction, analyzing narrative, breaking it down. And again, that's why I love like Steve Bissett. Looking back, even before I had this kind of training, I was, responding positively to these, pushing the limits kind of illustrators. So yeah.
Did you have in mind doing like anything specific, like book covers or
Um,
movie posters or anything like that?
Kind of. Actually, I had in mind to be a comic book illustrator. I don't have like, I actually probably could run over and get something. But like I was part of a comic book club at Syracuse University, and
So awesome. Did that still survive? Can people still see your illustrations anywhere?
yeah, like I think they're right here. Like, hold on a second, let me go grab them. I'll be right
Okay.
back. Like, take me 20 seconds. Okay, here we are. So these were comics that we were publishing at Syracuse University as students with the funding from our the student council money, basically your student association money. And this is a cover that I helped pencil on the background, and I collaborated with two other artists, Steve Ellis and Ryan Dunleavy, who are both now professional illustrators, comic artists as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome,
And,
man.
yeah, and then let's see. Then Steve Ellis and I collaborated on my final year at Syracuse, and we did this stuff here. Let me get this up high enough.
Yeah, no, awesome, man.
Yeah. So this is the stuff that I was doing my final year at Syracuse. Totally inspired by like Jeff Darrow's Hard Boiled and Akira.
Okay. Both I love. Yeah, I love Jeff's stuff. Yeah.
So that's So when I left Syracuse, my body, like a third of my body of work in my portfolio was comic related.
Okay.
It was pages.
So what moves you towards more of the oil painting field? Because that's what you're known for.
Yeah, but I was, the catch was I was also a really good painter.
Right.
And the first here, so this is the pathways that probably could have happened. Right. So when I showed my portfolio, started showing my portfolio, the first person who kind of gave me a chance was a book cover representative. He was an illustrator who, a guy who represented cover illustrators, and he was looking for somebody who could do science fiction and fantasy because he was getting all these new commissions in that genre.
That kind of seems to the path that Frank Frazetta took as well. Like he was a comic illustrator for a while. It's amazing comics, and now he's known for his amazing paintings.
Amazing paintings, yeah. But I didn't even have a comics career. I didn't even have a chance. So it was like, that first opportunity to get a job was to do book covers, and that's what I worked for. I made a couple 6 samples for Sal. Sal Baraka was the guy's name. And he got me the first jobs, and that led to the next job and the next, and boom, I was off being a book cover illustrator instead of doing comics.
did you want to write into the stories as well, or were you happy doing the illustration?
No, that's just it. Like the stories that I did were written by my friends, so I never really wrote stories to illustrate. So I was always kind of collaborating with other people, which also probably made me very successful as a book cover illustrator because I
Right.
knew how to negotiate that middle ground pretty well. I was very comfortable playing in that middle ground.
Well, there's that cliche that a picture says 1,000 words, so yeah,
Yeah,
if you illustrate it well, it tells a lot of story. A lot of the comic illustrators they're kind of not given the credit I think they deserve because they really gave the look to it. If they were good illustrators, they gave as much to the story as the actual writer did.
yeah, they can be. Yeah, certainly. Like I think comic illustration is certainly getting its recognition more lately. It's just a matter of I think another decade before we start seeing more like a museum show. Like
Right.
that's what's sad is like comics are one of the greatest art forms of the 20th century, and you don't see it. You walk into Metropolitan Museum, you walk into Museum of Modern Art, and you don't see comic pages on the walls, right?
Right.
They're devoid of them. And so someday we'll see those. They'll be
Well, it's
there.
one of those things you got stereotyped, like like tattooing or like rock music or anything else. It's like for a long time had to fight away from the stereotypes and the cliches to get where it is now
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
respected as an art form.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so yeah.
so what got you into Lord of the Rings? Because that's what you're really really well known for. Because you do these amazing paintings for Lord of the Rings.
Well, thanks. Yeah, that Lord of the Rings kicked in just soon after I played Dungeons and Dragons. So it was but I was starting to play D&D, and my older brother Mike was had just read a book for his English class at school, and he said, "Here, you might like this book," and it was The Hobbit. And yeah, I liked it. And I proceeded to read Lord of the Rings, all three of the Fellowship, the Two Towers, the Return of the King, and I just was on a pathway to being an avid fantasy reader after that.
Was it
So
one of those things where like when I read stuff because I'm an artist and I picture how everything looks. I'm like, well, it should be like this, it should be like this, and like I kind of create a world in my head about what
oh,
I
what
think is going on.
that's the power of Tolkien is that he doesn't describe things. He
Right.
doesn't get into physical descriptions. Like if you try to find out what Frodo looks like, there's almost nothing. There's mentions of like hairy feet for all hobbits, not Frodo in particular. But the only one description of Frodo is that he has a cleft chin.
Okay.
That's it. Like there's no other description. There's no descriptions of Merry or Pippin. None of Sam. Like there's emotive things. You can't like Strider is like dressed in brown and green. Or no, I think that was Legolas. And we have no idea what Legolas's hair color was, like what his face structure might be, whether elves had pointy ears. Like none of this. Like Tolkien just doesn't describe this stuff. So as an illustrator, you can run with it. You can just go like, wow, anything is possible. Yeah.
So what did you base it like? What was your inspiration for the way things should look?
Oh, well, certainly I grew up looking at Alan Lee, John Howe, Ted Nasmith, Michael Garland, David Wenzel. So these are Tim and Greg Hildebrandt, Michael Kaluta. So these are all illustrators that were
Mike Lewis is an amazing talent. I love his stuff, especially on the Shadow. Like I
yeah,
don't think
yeah, like
anybody did the Shadow as well as he did.
yeah, more comics, right? And the other illustrators like Ian Miller, who
Mhm.
did like all this great black and white work. So basically, my point is that the world of Tolkien did not have a set vision. There wasn't anybody that you could say this is what it is the best representation of that. So I remember getting this book, the Tolkien Bestiary, when I was a teenager, and it was edited by David Day, and it had approximately 40 different illustrators who were
Okay.
interpreting Tolkien's world. and Ian Miller was one of that was in them. Alan Lee was also in there. I think John Howe was too young, so he wasn't actually in that book. But that book set it up so that I felt like my work could be plausible in Tolkien's world, because there were, the 40 other people were doing visions of it, stylistically very different, realistic painting, really almost abstract, graphic representations. And so as a young artist, I felt very comfortable playing, making images out of Tolkien's world.
What gave you the opportunity? Like, what was the first the first chance you had to kind of get into that world and start putting out illustrations?
Oh wow. Boy, let's see. I mean, as a professional, it's actually probably my lowest level of quality I've ever done for Tolkien. It's sad. It's like, this is the truth. It's the Iron Crown Enterprises was a game company that was publishing a Middle Earth trading card game, kind of like a spin. After Magic the Gathering took off, so
Right.
they had the Tolkien license, and they were publishing Middle Earth cards. But the pay was horrible. It was like $150 a card. And they needed stuff really fast.
Right.
And they had style guides for what they wanted everything to look like. So I did a couple, like maybe a handful of nice cards, and then most of them were really crappy, really bad pieces of art. So that was sad. I felt really like depressed a little bit about the quality of what I was, because it was like up and down. Like, I do a good painting and then 3 really bad ones, and then maybe 1 good one. And
do you also have the thing where, like, you do an amazing painting and they wouldn't reproduce it right, so you're like, hey, it looks so much better in person? I don't know what you did.
No, I just sucked. It was just really some really bad pieces of art. So it was no fault of the publisher, really, except for the pay scale. So I didn't really have time. I couldn't spend time on any of these things.
Well, I know a lot of comic artists complain about that, like these like impending schedules where it's like, we need everything right now, and then they constantly edit and revise it, but not from an artistic perspective, more from a sales perspective. And did you run into that?
Yep. No, that's truly what comics was, and that, my hat's off to illustrators who can deliver quality under those kind of deadlines. I mean, it's just super impressive to see what some illustrators can do, some artists can do. And so, but like when I got those Middle Earth cards, I wasn't really good at managing speed. So I was still like a slow oil painter. And so I had not developed a style that collaborated with speed, the necessary, deliveries of speed. So, but I guess the reason why I want to point that out is that a few years later, I received the commission to do the cover of The Hobbit for David Wenzel's graphic novel. They were republishing that book, Ballantine Books was, and they contacted me about redoing a cover for that. And that's when I pulled out all stops. That's when I just went full on like Peter Paul Rubens, Caravaggio, like approach towards Lord of the Rings. And that literally,
I love Caravaggio. I kind of love his story too. It's like he did all this stuff that like kind of like pissed off everybody, but it was so good they didn't dare get rid of him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the way he used really like prostitutes or models who weren't perfectly I guess approved by the church for.
And he was gay, and back in the day that was like a huge thing. And like he would often sleep with like his models and stuff, and eventually get chased out of court, and then somebody else hired him because they're like, oh, he's so good, he has to work for us.
Right. Yeah, that's a trade-off, right? He was just too good. and doing something different too, right, with his lighting structures.
Oh yeah, he's the inspiration of this day, I think.
Yeah, he could not be ignored. Yeah, it was amazing. So so Caravaggio is one of those narrative realism illustrator artists that I love to turn to for a bit of tapping into for inspiration. Yeah.
Well, I remember, I think I read something about your journey when you first moved to New York, and you didn't get a job immediately. So you're going to a lot of art museums, looking at the famous masters and kind of examining their work. Is that true?
Oh, I mean, that started even before I moved to New York. Being at Syracuse University, I mentioned, they had visiting artists come up to teach. And I then started making trips then to go visit the museums, go visit like what is New York? You hear about it and
Right.
go to see gallery shows and really getting firsthand exposure to original works of art. And that's again my perception of there's one thing to look at a reproduction in a book to see a painting, another thing to see the original work
Right.
of art, oil painting or acrylic or whatever it was, firsthand. So yeah, that's my first year here in the city was not quite first year, but when I first moved here, the first 6-7 months, I didn't have like a regular job, and so I was spending time going to the museums, working part time at the Society of Illustrators, and making samples for Sal Baraka. As you know, that's when I was trying to break into that book cover market.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I read the Frank Miller Batmans, and I thought that's what New York looked like. And I remember my art teacher saying, if you want to make a career, you have to move to New York. So I moved to New York thinking it was going to be just like Batman.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is it's an interesting place, huh? Right.
Right.
So how long did you live here, or what? Like when?
Well, I still live here now, but now
Oh,
I live out in Long Beach, New York. But
okay,
I moved
further out.
to basically the city. I moved to Brooklyn, and I moved to Brooklyn in '98.
Okay,
And I remember there was a lot more of like a kind of artistic sense. Like I could get lost in the Lower East Side for like the entire day, just looking at stuff,
yeah,
and
right.
you can't really do that anymore, I don't think.
I think you can. It's just you're looking at different things. There's certainly a grittiness that's still here in New York. It's
Right.
it's changed. Like I was just in Manhattan 2 days ago, and it was like, wow, it's not quite, like I don't come in here as much. The the play, like you don't have to go for art supplies, like
Right.
right. So I used to go in all the time to Pearl Paint or New York
Right. Well, now
Central.
you just go like online and order
Yeah,
everything
right.
and come right to your house. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go figure drawing down in Soho. Go up to
Yeah.
the Society of Illustrators like almost like once a month at least, going to see a new show. So yeah, it's like definitely the vibe, but it just might be age. It's just like no, it's probably just age because I think New York still has a lot to offer.
It might be, but it seems like they had like I remember they had a bar called the Pharmacy, and it was a pharmacy that they made into a bar, but it still had like the medicine cabinets and everything. So there's
Yeah,
like lots of like cool stuff and like record stores. You could go downstairs, they have all the used records and stuff like that.
yeah, that's true. Some of that, the
But it sounded like
antiquity.
an old man if I talk about all this stuff, like back in my day.
Yeah, but it is, you're right. There is some truth to that. Well, it's in a way that was like retail, right? I mean, a lot of these things that you can refer to, like the Strand books
Yeah.
or like
Well,
used
I remember
equipment,
that place. I had to
right?
do an album cover, and I didn't have internet, so I went there and I bought medical books because I had to draw like an autopsy. So I bought all these medical books, so I had reference.
Yeah, and that's the Strand up until like maybe about 10 years ago, I really stopped using it as a like a go-to resource. Partly because the internet just took over everything.
Right.
Um,
Well, now you can just put it in Google and you'll find
yeah,
like
right.
a million pictures,
A
everything you
million, right?
need.
But I still love having like behind me, you can probably see the wall of books.
Yeah,
A lot of those are Strand book purchases there, used books, things that again that in a way they're nice because they also represent usually visuals that most people aren't tapping into. So if you do a Google search, right,
it's true.
a
That's so true.
million other illustrators are doing that too, right?
Right.
But a book is
Like
like
everyone just that same girl face.
yeah,
Like,
that's right. Yeah. Watch out for that Afghan young woman figure.
yeah.
Yeah, even the AI is Trump, like knocking down and
Right.
copying that one.
And they
Yeah,
get the trend, like whatever's popular, it's like, well, this girl of this age, she has to have eyebrows like this.
yeah,
Maybe she has to have an animal on her head. I don't know. That was a thing for a while.
Yeah.
Like it's all trends,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that
You
fills up
want,
the majority of it.
yeah, as an artist, you want to walk the path least taken in some way, right? So so that's in a way that's like part of my illustration career too, is like when I was getting in here, I saw that people weren't like some of the illustrators in the genre weren't embracing like a classicalism of I could call it that, like the Caravaggio, Rubens
Right.
aesthetic thrown into fantasy and science fiction. So I decided, oh, you know what, that can be a little niche of mine that I can like really carve out, like do a Van Eyck. Like how would Jan Van Eyck or Hieronymus Bosch do science fiction? Like
Yeah, yeah.
and
No,
like
that's a good approach. Yeah.
tackle
Do
that.
you did you get some feedback? Like they're like, well, that might be artistic, but commercially, this is what you need to do. Like I remember
No,
my
yeah.
first comic book interview, and the editor said, like he looked at my portfolio, he goes, "This might work in art school, but let me tell you what sells."
Oh wow! Luckily, no. I had the thing is that I had Sal Baraka as my representative for 8 years, and
Okay.
so he was really a champion for me. Like he really was supportive. So he and as a buffer as well to like negativity or criticism. So he really helped me, allowed me to grow underneath his wings. So yeah, a big thanks to Sal for giving providing that chance for me to grow. So yeah, I didn't have people telling me like that's not what we want to see. I just I was able to just do it and
Yeah,
Sal.
no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you do now? Do you do mostly covers? Do you do you teach as well, right?
Yeah, I'm mostly doing, let's see, probably like a 50-50. Magic the Gathering. I've been
Hmm.
doing a lot of work with them lately because they're back doing like really good stories and things and giving a little more time on the execution of the works. And then I also do a lot of private commissions and my own personal paintings as well. So,
Okay.
yeah, I just completed a giant epic Middle Earth landscape for a museum show down in Huntsville, Alabama.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
yep.
Are you kind of a go-to guy for like certain genres or whatever? Like if somebody does a new sci-fi book and they go, "Oh, you got to talk to Donato. He'll do this amazing painting for you," or for Lord of the Rings or anything like that? Or you
Well,
think there are too many people out there at this point?
I think there's all. Well, the thing is, I haven't pursued. I should say, I haven't pursued doing a lot of cover work anymore. Uh,
Okay.
in a way, I like if I'm gonna do my stories, like I'm fine doing like Magic the Gathering as stories, but if I want to do something else, I find I have my own like series of ideas, or I want to play in Middle Earth a little more. So I don't. Yeah, I haven't really wanted to do book cover illustration for quite a few years now. Even though I do still want periodically, I do it. I still get commissions here and there, but I'm not pursuing it because I have all this depth of stories that I want to do on my own, even though I'm not writing them. They're there. They're kind of actually up on a wall over here.
Well, a
Like
good picture tells a story.
what's that?
A
Yeah,
good picture tells a story.
yeah, it does.
The way
Right,
you illustrate it tells a story.
right, and it's an implied story,
Yeah.
which is enough to like satisfy me visually and thematically inside a composition. Yeah.
Well, I think some of the best stories don't spell out everything, but they kind of give you impressions, and you
Right.
can kind of fill in what you need.
Yeah, that's the ambiguity aspect of that, and I learned that quite the power of ambiguity from another painter, Vincent Desiderio, who I assisted with when I first moved to New York. So yeah, I should say, like while I was trying to break into the industry, I also was apprenticing with Vincent in his studio. He's a very incredible realist painter, oil painter,
Okay.
fine art world, and his images are all about ambiguity. They're narrative ambiguity with his characters, and so that's something I certainly try to tap into now more so as a kind of more like a fine art science fiction fantasy painter of letting that stuff hang out there and like you said, letting the audience complete the narrative, complete
Kind of
the
fill in
idea.
the blanks or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah.
So, did you kind of go in like cycles, like you were doing like Lord of the Rings for a while, and then you're doing this for a while, and you're doing that for a while? Like it seems like you've done pretty much everything.
Oh no, it's like I'm juggling. I've always got multiple projects going. Like I've got a Lord of the Rings painting over there. I've got a couple magic cards down at my feet. I've got in my sketchbook a couple of astronaut paintings I want to do. I've got sketches that I'm working on right now for my next robot painting that I'm going to be executing. So, and then I've got a book cover commission and interior illustrations that I need to do for Grim Oak Press.
Okay.
So all of like that's all that stuff is concurrent.
Well, it's better to be too busy than not busy enough.
Yeah.
At least in my experience, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's partly why I try to keep everything in motion and not like I probably could do like 100% all magic cards if I just said, you know what, give me whatever you can and I'll fill up my entire schedule. They probably would feed me that way, but I don't want to. Like I want to stay diversified. I think all aspects of my work benefit from all the other aspects. So
you probably feel a little more inspired to do new stuff as
exactly. Yeah. So when I get to do a magic card, I'm not feeling burned out. I'm feeling excited about it. Right. I'm tapping into these other things, and then I take that excitement and visual world building that magic does, and I can throw that into what I do with my robots.
Okay.
So it's really, I think that diversity keeps me very inspired. And then, going out to Manhattan, go to see a new exhibition, a new show.
Okay.
Fuels that.
I remember I was so disappointed when I first came to New York and I didn't know what to look at. So I was just like, I'll just go to galleries. And I remember one had like is a Volkswagen Beetle. It was like obviously from a junkyard. They spray painted it white and they had like some huge price tag on it. I was like, that's not fucking art.
Well, it is art. It might not be what you want to buy.
That's true. It's true. I it's in the eye of the beholder. So,
it is. But you know what? That's the stuff I like. Sometimes those surprises can be, I've learned like art. You can enjoy art on many different layers, levels, right? And so if it's, even if it's nothing I would want to hang in my house, it's like I want to see like why the artist made that choice, like why they do that, and when you can analyze that's that painting, deconstruction aspect of learning is like, when you get into like why they made that choice, and you go like, oh yeah, I could see that, or maybe I can use a little bit of that myself,
even if it's that color scheme or that perspective, or
the idea of like reappropriating old technology. And that's what makes Star Wars so good, right? The original that junk, right? By throwing beat up junk, the droids, right? The Jawas that collected junk, right?
Yeah.
That like Lucas gave flavor to that world.
Right? Well, I think he really nailed it in the first trilogy, because it seemed like he was like, he was on point with that. And he was trying to incorporate everything he liked in that, as opposed to getting feedback from the audience.
I don't. Who knows what happened? But certainly, for me, those first two films.
Well, Disney buying out. That's what happened. I mean, Disney's not all bad. They do some great stuff, but I don't think that was the right approach for Star Wars. But hey, whatever.
Although I've heard people raving about is it Andor, the new one? I haven't seen that yet, but that's supposed to be.
I've seen that. There's a series called Andor. It's pretty good. I've seen like I think like 3 episodes of it so far. It's pretty good. I mean, I like the Mandalorian a little bit better. The Mandalorian feels like old school Star Wars to me.
All right,
but it's not bad. So far it has potential. I have to see more of it.
Okay. Yeah.
But so right now, what you're working on mainly is like pet projects of your own, not necessarily, assignments given to you, or like you'll kind of pick and choose between assignments depending on how you like it, but you're well known enough so that you have that luxury.
Yeah, kind of. Like I don't really pursue clients right now.
Okay.
I mean, almost like, wait for the phone to ring, even though it's telemarketers at his day. Wait for the email to come in. And so I tend to.
And they have a great way to update your website and like get you more social likes and views and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I do advertise in a way, like I'm like constantly posting on social media with my new projects. So
Right.
I call it passive advertising, like where you're just sending out information, and whoever might feel attachment for a robot for my Middle Earth landscapes, then they know how to get a hold of me. They know that I'm available for commissions. I keep my website up to date with all the new magic cards that I do, so they see that I'm being commissioned, right? So it's more. So I tend to do a very passive approach
Now,
toward.
give us a shout out. What's where can people look at your work? I've been to your
Oh,
website, but tell everybody what your website is.
oh, it's just donatoarts.com. So the spelling is always a good one. So like if you just look up Donato, Donato,
Right.
and
We'll put it up here so
arts.
everyone can see and they can see your
Yeah, you
progress.
could put it in there. Yeah. I mean, you do it on, Twitter is Donato Arts, Instagram is Donato Arts, the website's Donato Arts. If you just type in Donato Arts into Google, you'll get a bajillion hits, and my website's right up there at the top. So that's what I mean. I feel like I don't have to be too overly proactive at this point in my career to like pursue clients. So I'm really just also just happy making these other paintings for myself, and then just selling them as fine art. Going to a few events or conventions in each year,
Okay.
sharing the new pieces and connecting with the.
COVID was kind of hard with all the lockdowns. You can't go to conventions. You can't show yourself.
Yeah, well, that's changed. That's I went to New York Comic Con just last month,
Okay,
and
awesome.
yeah. So that was crowded. It was packed. It was great. It was a great show. Yeah,
Yeah, I think people are glad to get out of the house now and see stuff.
yeah, certainly.
One thing I really like is like you will show your in progress, like what you do, like how you construct a painting, like you show your
Oh,
sketches and everything.
yeah,
And I know that you'll show stuff like this is a sketch for it. This is when I've like kind of like laid the foundation of the coloring, but it's
right.
not the full piece. And I think you have a little bit different approach than a lot of people do. Like you draw it on paper first. Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly, yeah. Almost every, like 99% of what I do is process oriented. I
Okay.
start with actually like this little wall here. It's a wall of thumbnails,
Okay.
and those are ideas waiting for a chance to be born into a final painting. Uh,
Okay.
so every painting I do starts with that foundation, and then I do a little larger drawing, and then I get my models, my references, my background material, whatever I need to fulfill a more complete drawing executed, and
Okay.
then I add color. So it's like it's comics. Right? It's like I'm kidding, but I'm also serious. It's like this is what comic illustrators do. They do a page layout. They do a rough
It's
design
true. It's
on a
like
page,
Walter
right?
Simonson was talking about that. And what he'll do is he'll actually, like, he used to do this. He says he's changed his method a little bit, but
Yeah,
it's similar, but like with a higher technological edge to it. But he'll take a small illustration, he'll draw little thumbnails, everything.
yeah,
And, so he captures all the action and the motivation
yeah.
and the flow
Point
and
of view,
everything.
the potential story, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and then he'll put it on a projector, and then he'll project it big, and then
Ah,
he'll sketch on the paper what the projector is blowing up on there, so he gets like the feel and the flow of it,
yeah.
and then he'll
Wow.
refine it. So
Yep.
I thought that was a good approach.
No, that's that. I mean, technically we do things just a little differently that I do. We between him and I, but it is the same It's the same conceptual process, right? Thumbnail design, storytelling, then the solidifying of detail and structure, and then color, right, gets added in. And once you've got the balance and movement of your piece laid out, then I mean, some people do work differently, right? And it's not saying that this is the way I don't teach like this is the method that you should use. This is just one way. This is what works for me. And color for me is a like a veneer. It's like a icing on the cake. After you do all this other stuff, then you can
Right,
add color and like really like jazz it up and really push your
like you lay
idea
down the
further.
hard work with the illustration, and
Right.
then from there
The
you bring
pencil.
it to life with the color.
That's right. Yes. And that's why I jokingly say it's like comics. It's like, the black and white line work, the penciling, the inking,
Right.
right? That goes the kind of visual development of what comics were back in the 80s and 90s is that's kind of, I still do that. That's my logic for image making.
I think some people really don't capture that. And I think that's what gives your stuff really that old school feel to it. Like it looks like you're really involved in the process of storytelling, and then you colorize it, as opposed to people that are just like, I'll put colors that'll grab your attention, and it doesn't feel as firm. It doesn't feel as realistic.
Well, there's different ways to make pictures, right? So certainly I am an object oriented illustrator, or like a wireframer, so to speak. Like I like world building, every element, the background, secondary elements, costuming, clothing. Whereas someone who might be more fluid with color is maybe playing on emotional structure or color fluidity and sensibility. So they end up transmitting a different feeling out of their work.
There's some people that seem to have that abstract that just kind of like it seems to like draw out something, like to bring something to life in the abstract, and then they put something in the foreground that's more solid, but you can kind of see the background. Even though it's abstract, it still kind of tells a story and makes the environment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just a different kind of storytelling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I to be, like, again, I'm preferencing my or examining my preferences is like I like the Hieronymus Bosch of like detail, or Jan van Eyck of like detail. That's why I like George Perez and John Byrne, right? And like those artists were like, or Jeff Durow, right? Those are the people I go to, and I love looking at their imagery and comments.
Well, I remember I went to Italy, and I went to I believe it was El Domo, and it was a famous museum, and they had one painting and it blew my mind. Like they were really playing with perspective. So it was the Napoleonic Wars, is Napoleon and all of his generals on a hill, and they were in focus, and all the cavalrymen in front of him and behind him were slightly out of focus. So your eyes were immediately drawn to the hill in the middle of the painting.
Wow.
I thought that was genius.
Nice. Wow.
Do you play with focus in your paintings at all?
Not like that. No, not as like a camera eye technical thing.
Yeah.
Focus for me is just a decrease in contrast, but it still preserves a high degree of detail.
Okay.
So I'll control with lighting and the brightness or contrast, color, saturations, but not structurally. I still think kind of like that flatness of, it's just an aesthetic thing. Like that's just me.
Right. Well, I know everybody's different. As long as it works, it works.
Yeah.
You
know, that's what style is, right? That's what
it is what style is,
right? Yeah. Otherwise, it'd be boring. Like if everything was a photograph, it'd be like boring as hell, right?
Right.
Who wants that?
Yeah, I actually think like a little bit of style involved in it makes it much more dramatic than just a photograph.
Yeah, right.
There are people that are like, oh, that's amazing, you can capture it. I'm like, I don't remember who it was. It's a British illustrator, and he says he tries not to make his stuff totally photorealistic because he's like, that's what cameras are for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you try to do, certainly I was like chasing, in the early 90s, right before there was Photoshop and such, that as illustrators we were chasing that photorealism.
Yeah. Well, that was the holy grail,
Yeah, well, it was, right, and then Photoshop transformed that, and like, where's our grail? Like, so, but luckily I still chase it, but not as much. At least for a book cover illustration, I'm not like chasing it as much. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like I like more traditional style artwork as opposed to digital artwork. And some of the digital artwork, it'll try very hard to mimic like the texture of like an oil painting or whatever. But I always feel slightly let down when I find out it's digital. Because it's like, it's so much easier, but it's almost like a cop out to make like the blends a little smoother, the white a little brighter, whatever.
Yeah, it's not quite a cop out. It's a wonderful tool, right?
You're being nice about it.
it'd be like, oh wow, because in a way I do like tweak some of my covers for publishing. Like, let's give it a little punch. But it's mostly because it just I'm aware of like, okay, when it goes to print, you just want a little bit more jazz. But when you see an original painting, sometimes you want more subtlety. Sometimes you don't want it to be so graphic,
Right.
as an art form. So like I'm happy to not like transform my pieces into really highly graphic paintings just because that's what I think the publisher wants. I'm trying to walk a middle ground with what I'm doing.
Well, one thing I've learned is you have to kind of like make the artwork fit what it's going to be applied to. Like
Right.
if it's a book cover, it's going to have this giant book title on it. It's going to have the author credit. So you have to leave a little space. And you have to move stuff out of the main frame or whatever, just so everything fits. So the end product looks good.
Yeah, that's part of right. So that's that is part of being that collaborative process that I talked about, like being a good book cover illustrator, is being sensitive so that you do leave room, you accommodate for those kind of design issues. And that's what I kind of get at is like, if I have a painting that has too much contrast in those areas, I'll sometimes decrease it down to make it a little easier.
Well, I notice also you paint very large, and when it's shrunk down to print size, it looks almost like a photograph. But I remember you did like a sci-fi painting, and it's like a guy in like a astronaut suit, and like his arm was like this, and you see a gleam on it. Would you see it in real life? Like you see like the illustrative spots on it, like the whites and stuff like that. But when it shrunk down to book cover size, you're like, it looks like it gleams. It looks like it's Photoshop.
Yeah, just just all those little edge, brush strokes, modulations are gone.
Yeah,
they just blow. And that's part of like trying to be that photorealist, like I mentioned. As a book cover illustrator. Yeah.
Well, do you do everything a little bit bigger than the size it's going to be published at, or the size it's going to be produced at?
Yeah, always. Yeah, I'm usually working 300 to 400% up from.
Okay.
So again, this is like hard copy published sizes. So, because like so many things are digital now. Magic cards. Some of them are just purely digital cards that are coming out. So they don't have a physical representation anymore, even in print. Yeah, like the world is changing. Yeah.
Well, I also noticed, I remember, and like, it seems like there's almost a debate in this. Like, some people are like, don't ever use solid black except for like in a couple, minor spots. And some people are like, no, use it all the time. And I remember when I originally do a painting, like, first I would sketch it out, in a pencil, but then I would use like watered down black. Well, I'd use serpentine and black, but watered down black to like kind of illustrate it as like a black and white illustration. And then I bring it up. And I remember maybe it was Patrick Jones was talking about his process, and he uses sepia tone instead of pure black.
Yeah, so it never goes fully dark, right? He always keeps a certain amount of luminosity.
Right. And then he only uses a little bit of black on the final product to make some stuff really pop.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I use black all the time here and there, but now like almost never really use it as a pure structure.
Okay.
So it's never just like 100% black unless I'm really chasing after something really dark or really, really massive. So yeah, I do use very little black in my, in my work. That's kind of the illusion of space. Like if you even like looking at this photo of me, in Zoom here, right? Like there's like under here, like the shadows.
It's black, but not pure black.
Yeah, but not purely. I would paint that with a bit of a warm glow. Right, as a painter, like if you see it in real life, there's almost no true black unless you're in like a dark cave or really high contrast light structures. So
I remember my art teacher was like, he was getting down in painting because like they make the blacks look blacker, they flatten everything out. So that's where it really helps to like draw from life.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that sensibility, seeing the subtlety of nature and color. Edges. Yeah, I used to go life drawing all the time. But, I mean, really, like that's in my early part of my career. I'd go probably once, usually about twice a month at least, sometimes 3 to 4 times, depending on my schedule. So I was going all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always, I feel like you can always learn. Like you'll be 80, you can still learn, So you teach right now? You teach mainly art students? Is it a more advanced program?
I used to teach at the School of Visual Arts for about 20 years, that in an undergraduate class there for science
Isn't
fiction.
that where Bern Hogarth is from?
I'm not sure. Oh, boy, that would have been a long time ago, right? Yeah.
No, but
But
I think he was the first person that did that because it didn't really exist. But it's like that dynamism they use in comic books, where like people are like more forward, more back. Like
yeah,
so they had to kind of invent that, like the whole cone and ball system,
yeah,
and
the
like
perspective stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. But I teach online class.
Okay,
So that's it's just once a week for 3 hours, kind of like a regular college class, and it's just basically the same class. But since I'm online, I can work with people all around the globe. Like I have artists from let's see, Thailand and Germany right now in my
okay.
class, and then Americans as well. So it's just like really, we got a really broad amount of people joining in
Well, I'd imagine your work makes it, all over the globe at this point, especially with like social media. People
yeah.
can see what your work looks like. So, do they, the people coming into it, they've seen your work previously and they really appreciate it. They want to learn like from one of the masters.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why they're taking a class. It's because it's from me. So and that's why I enjoy. Well, because they're motivated. They want to learn storytelling. They want to learn realism. So it's really nice to get a really super dedicated and focused group of artists together. And it's small. I cap it at 8 people. So it's
Okay.
not a large classroom. It's really small, very intimate, lot more discussion and feedback.
Well,
Um,
if they want to get advice and they want to get teaching from you, how would they get a hold of you? How would they find you?
Well, that's you can email me. It's on my website.
Okay.
This class that I teach is with the Smart School, and that's also listed on my website as well. So if you type in thesmartschool.com, no, I think it's the Smarter Art School. We'll put a link in
We'll
there.
find it. We'll put it up.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's like again, I own, and there's other artists that teach like Greg Manches, Dan DeSantos, Scott
Right.
Fisher, Cynthia Shepard, Ray
Right.
Bonilla. So there's like about 8 of us that teach on like kind of a once a class, once a week kind of session with that.
Well, I remember like, I read as well, and I took like it was like a BBC like online course session from Alan Moore, and everything he talks about, you can just like basically watch his like 6 hour video.
Oh wow, yeah.
I would imagine with an art teacher, he needs to kind of look at your stuff and say, "This is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to work on."
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like the classes I do they're not recorded. They're all live. They're interactive. I critique. I do workovers digitally. So people will email me files, and I'll even though I'm not a digital illustrator, I'll work on them, talk about
Right.
color, composition, story. So it's
Well, I'd
very
imagine it would apply. Like you might not know exactly what keyboard button to hit, but
yeah.
it
I'm
applies. Yeah.
horrible with but it's enough to communicate, right? And it
Yeah.
gets a point across. So it really helps out. Yeah, the students
Well,
with that.
I remember my art teacher, like one thing that I don't know if you've encountered this, hopefully you haven't, but people would bring stuff in and he would say something about like the anatomy or the light source or something and say, "Oh, well, that's my style." And he's like, "No, if you look at like Picasso, he knew all the rules before he broke them. So you kind of have to know the rules to break them."
Yeah, because I yeah, I've learned how to as a teacher, I've seen a lot of different styles. And yeah, it's learning like, okay, what are you trying to do?
Right.
That's usually what I usually ask the artists, and like, okay, this is where it's effective. This is what you can improve on. Certainly because there are quirky drawing styles,
Right.
right? And that's part of a visual language that an artist can develop. Like Walt Simonson in a way, right?
Right.
The stylization, or Bill Sienkiewicz, right? Doing his,
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
I'm a huge fan of his stuff. Or
Yeah,
like
right,
Sam Keith, who did like the mechs. He
right.
exaggerated everything, but he definitely has an artistic style.
That's right. So there's like right. So it's not about being photoreal. It's just being like, what is your intent? How are you trying to
Right.
communicate? And let's analyze that and let's take a look at it. So I think that again, that's being open to finding like that. Like I mentioned about like fine art. It's even in comic art. Like what is the artist trying to do? How are they trying to communicate? And when you can find that groove or find that essence about the artist, then you can probably enjoy their work better, really, and dive in and really go on that journey with them, with what they're doing.
Well, everything I see of yours looks like there's a story behind it. And I always want to, like, even if I do like a straight up painting for like a book cover and they say, do whatever you want, which it doesn't happen enough, but I wish it happened more. But they say, do whatever you want. I still try and like tell a story, or at least in my head, I have a story when I do the illustration.
Yeah.
Do you do the same thing? Because it seems like a lot of your stuff has like a story behind it.
Oh, 100%. Like, I mean, again, that's part of what I came out of doing a lot of book covers, Dan, is that it just, yeah, you had to tell a story, right? I mean, that's
right.
the point of doing a book cover. But as I'm doing even other pieces, I'm, like, how do I layer in an implied story? Like if I'm working on this, or even, like magic, sometimes magic has sometimes a simple theme to the concept, but it's like, okay, I want to add something else in there. I want to give a little more depth. And so I find little ways of weaving more cultural artifacts. Again, that's all from the stories I like to tell, the movies that we're talking about. I mean, everything like that I love about great science fiction and fantasy is about this holistic world building,
right,
and integrated structure of character.
When you do like a book cover or like a game cover or whatever, do you read into it? Like if it's a book, do you read the book or you read a portion of the book?
No, yeah. Like the book cover, like I'm doing now. It's a novel where we're doing 6 interior illustrations and a cover. So like reading the entire book. And
that's awesome. I wish more people did that. The interior illustrations. I think that really brings it out.
Well, it is, and that's part of the new wave of, I mean, with some of the costs coming down for color printing, in general, right? They can do this. It's more possible that you can do these kind of things. Yeah.
No, I think that really gives it a feel. But like whenever I do like a magazine cover, they'll send me a story. They're like, illustrate something out of this story. And it always used to bother me as a kid when I buy a book, because it's an amazing cover and you read it and nowhere is that cover present in the book. You're like, nobody looks like that. That didn't happen.
Right. That's part of the editor's problem, right? They might have they just probably bought a pre-existing painting from another artist and slapped it on because it looked good. I mean, those days are those are rare now. Like, right. There's so many artists who are willing to tell stories, right? To illustrate. I don't think that's an issue as much now. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big Frazetta fan, but I remember reading, I've read all of his books, and he had, one of his books was talking about, like, I don't even read the stories. I just do what I think would be a good painting. Like some of the paintings are nothing like the story.
Yeah, that's right. That was the early days of marketing, and right. That's the power of also what he was doing and breaking the traditions. So people were just, it doesn't matter.
Well, he could do almost anything, and people go, dude, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing painting, right? Yeah, that's what it was. It was about sales, right?
All right, man. Well, how can people look at your stuff? Are you selling into your originals? Are you selling prints? I know I bought a couple of you had like these slim books like full of your illustrations, like almost portfolios, and I remember calling you up and like you actually answered. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I don't. I do have. I got my big Middle Earth tome from Dark Horse.
Okay.
There. I think it might still be in print, or it might be close to being out of print, but you can find usually used copies. And on my website, I've got print, like hundreds of prints, originals, drawings. If there's, I think there's a couple drawings still available there. But that's all through my website, the donatoarts.com website. And I try to keep modestly up to date with news in there. And the galleries I keep up to date with all new artwork. So you can always see new stuff there as well.
Like what you're working on, what are you up to at this moment?
Yeah, kind of like mostly what I'm working on. I usually just wait until I've got finished pieces to share. But there's technique videos on my website. There's the technical stuff. There's like galleries with hundreds of drawings if you want to look at how my process is there. So it's
I recommend that. Yeah, because I thought it was a huge help. You know,
Oh yeah.
there's stuff where like you don't even know how to approach it. They're like, well, I removed the seat from my toilet bowl so I could draw this curve. You're like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I guess you got to improvise sometimes, you know.
Yeah. Like the bathtub paintings. Yeah.
But yeah, man, thank you very much for doing this. I
Oh,
really appreciate it. Do you have anything else you want to give a shout out to or have people take a look at?
no, not really. I mean, it's just been a pleasure talking with you, Dan. Sharing my passion and you know, and having a great chat tonight. Yeah.
All right, well, awesome. Thank you very much, man.
All right. Have a good night.
You
Goodbye,
too.
everyone.